Before anything, I want to obviously welcome you to this session on pronouns usage when it refers to gender. It's and I also want to thank you for being a member of Share My Meal, for being a volunteer. We are all volunteer here, but we couldn't do anything without you guys. So thank you for doing that. This session is a great example of what we are trying to achieve at Share My Meals, where not only do we want to support the food insecure community, but I think we also want to support each other in learning, in growing, and by taking the lead today, Priscille is really showing us that a volunteer can support other volunteers by sharing her knowledge and her sensitivity for an issue. So once again, thank you so much for being a member of Share My Meal, and thank you for Priscille for leading this session. Priscille Bourquelot is a Princeton resident. I'm reading for a short introduction here. She's been a resident here since 1915 and a volunteer in Share My Meal since...
20.
Oh, yeah.
I'm an early bird, but not 1915.
2015, obviously. And you have been with Share My Meal since May 2020. You are a parent of a 19-year-old transgender person of non-binary gender. And you've been learning a lot in the last 3 years on the topic of gender, inclusive language, and the broader equity for the LGBTI people. So thank you so much, Priscille, for making time for us today to enlighten us when it comes to how we should address this community. You can start. So I think you don't need anything special to present. You can just go to the bottom of your screen and click on present now, bottom right.
Yes, I'm going to do that right now. I wanted to wait that.
And I guess during the presentation, I think it would be good for each of us to mute our mic. And again, you go down the screen and you click on the mic.
I see a black window, but not a slide.
I see your slides.
Okay. So I see it on my separate screen. That's okay. Perfect. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of the walk.
Sorry, Priscille, before you start, can you present the slide? Can you put them in diaporama, in presenter mode? Yeah, thank you.
Is that better?
It's good, yeah.
So I am now working in a pharmaceutical company, and in that company, in the last couple of years, I have got myself involved as an ally and advocate, as a member of what's called an employee resource group. So specifically, the Pride employee resource group in my company. And it's been a very much life-changing for me to also be part of a community at work that has to do with rights, visibility, equity, and speaking on behalf, not being able to translate experience of other people, but advocating for other people like you to hear about some experiences. So I'm very happy to share a little bit of what I learned. So the first topic I like to talk about or introduce in the company, and so today here, is what's the benefit of this new buzz about sharing one's pronouns. So I don't know if you can see my label. I put a name tag, and on it doesn't matter that you don't see it well, but I put my name and I put she, her. These are the pronouns I want to be talked about. And it doesn't matter whether these pronouns were already the ones I had at birth. You didn't know me then, and you don't even have to change your habits if I tell you these are my pronouns. And I think one of the reasons Stanislas and Macarena explained to me talking about today is the purpose of Share My Meals here is to promote more knowledge about how to be respectful to the community, and this is one aspect, the topic of pronouns, gender, etc. So one way I justify why we should use our pronouns more proactively is that there is so much diversity in society and at work. We don't always identify the gender of person because the culture of their first name is very far from where we grew up, and we could hardly say genders, and it's maybe not for us to make a guess. We need to develop an inclusive culture. And why assume? Think about citizenship or religion. Do we assume each other's citizenship? Do we feel totally comfortable? Yes, maybe in some subgroups, but not every day. Sometimes it's not perceived very well to assume, are you from China maybe? This is not so easy. So the best way is maybe to be proactive, and that has another benefit, is to be inclusive. And then I want to introduce you to more verbiage about why the use of gender-neutral pronouns lately, and why use them even in our daily life, not talking about anybody in particular, but precisely because we don't know the gender of someone, we can refer to them by they, as I just did by saying we can refer to them. I think I would like to move a few slides and then we will pause for already getting into question. So what's new? We already are very familiar, all of us, with what is called third person pronouns. And I'm not talking about a third category. I'm talking about the very common situation where we refer to someone. So if I refer to Stanislas while talking to Jonan, for example, I will say he, okay? And reciprocally, I am assuming, okay, that it's he and his, and it's she and her. So far, that's what I heard others use. Now, there's a third way of referring to a person in their absence. It's to say they. I actually, once you have been familiarized with this use of other than he or she, or plural they, but the use of singular they, you will realize that you hear it in daily life very often. Maybe much more by young people. At least if you listen to podcasts or YouTubes, or be aware, and you will start to notice that they and them is used very commonly about singular persons, that the gender either doesn't matter or you don't want to assume. And sometimes it's the chosen pronouns, like my kid, for example, who wants others to use they and them pronouns if referring to them. So it's not a plural, and it's sometimes a little bit tricky to navigate, because you can say, Dan is a friend of mine. They are a cook in Blue Bears. So then the person turns to you and says, you're talking about one person or about several? Do you have one kid or several kids? Well, let's get familiar. And it can be the same sentence. It can be, Dan is a cook and they are working in Blue Bears. A little gymnastics. Personally, it took me 1 month. And then I commonly sleep. So that's about this last bullet on this slide. Gender neutral pronouns, the most common way is they, them. And a lot of non-binary people, whether they call themselves transgender or not, they don't consider themselves as binary, which for people of Latin or scientific background is this easy term about duality, he or she. So they don't recognize this. They don't feel like this fits for them. And if you ask them, the question might be, how do you know you're a woman? It's not because you look at your genitals, probably. It's internal. It's in your brain. So we're going to go a little bit more in detail between sex, gender, and sexuality, which are different things, and also gender expression. Do you wear dresses? Do you wear pants? But that's a little bit another topic. I just want to highlight that this topic of gender-neutral pronouns has become so present that the word last year Merriam-Webster dictionary had their word of the year day. What does it mean, word of the year, on Merriam-Webster website? It just means that this was the most frequently researched term. So it tells you how many people have been curious of looking, what is this they that I hear? Why are they using this? They wanted information. So the key message about this is what's important is to respect chosen pronoun. A tongue slip is fine, provided you apologize and you move quickly and correct. That's what's important. There are a number of links in this slides, and I can easily share. I think they provide a number of viewpoints. You can see that as early as 2015, the BBC website in their news magazine already alluded to that. That's the second last reference. You can also see that the one called Gender Stickers in College has to do with Harvard, and they have decided that it's much easier that everybody has a name tag with the pronouns, and so there's no question. It's also it's for students, it's also for staff. Now I would like to pause before we go into the gender unicorn and open for question, comments. If there's none, we can pull everything at the end.
Okay, I don't see any question, or if you're speaking, remember that you might be muted.
So then I'll liaise this slide with the next one, saying that this last reference testimony starts with a term that may warrant a bit of clarification. It says, "Dear cis people who put your pronouns on your hello, my name is" name tag. And so now just a little bit of a glossary. In Latin, trans means the opposite and cis means the same. So the definition of transgender and cisgender, first it refers to gender, nothing else. Not sexuality, not chromosomes, nothing. Just gender, which is what you perceive as your gender. And so transgender people are defined as in general. Now they have to define themselves. But in general, transgender term is considered to be a term that a person whose perception of their gender doesn't match the one assigned at birth. So this word of assigned at birth may come sometimes when you read about transgender topics. But anyway, we don't want to check and ask people what is their gender assigned at birth. This is not the concern. What matters is what they feel is their gender. Okay. When it's different from the one assigned at birth by the doctor who delivered the baby, or sorry, I shouldn't say the doctor, whoever delivered the baby, maybe the mother alone, by the way. And the cisgender people are the ones who never consider there's a question, that they just feel fine with whatever they were called from birth. Okay. And let's move now into this diagram that was actually created by a transgender person whose references and website are at the bottom of the slide, which is transstudent.org/gender. And the design credit is for Landin Pan and Anamora. So this is a tentative educational graphic about 4 different things. Gender identity, which is in the brain. How do you know you're a man or a woman? You perceive it. or non-binary person or another gender, what is your gender expression? So it's much less common in today's society to see all gender, not all genders, for example, use makeup the same way. So today I've put some lipstick on, but I see Stanislas did not, and Dennis neither, and I earlier saw Paul neither. And I don't know if you do, and it maybe doesn't matter. It's about gender expression, it's your choice. Of course, women have a lot of access to many things due to past requests. Men don't have as much choice today to wear dresses. I don't know if you would like to, but some people do like to. And that's something else. Whether you wear things that are expected for your gender or not is not necessarily linked to your anatomy and not necessarily linked to how you feel in terms of your identity. At least you can look at the generation that I'm not going to say the right letter for, but certainly Alpha, which is the next wave of, I think, maybe Stanislas as one of these. Alpha, their gender expression and their clothing is very, very different from probably what many of us have grown with. So I already mentioned sex assigned at birth, and basically what is assigned at birth is not based on chromosomes, despite this little cartoon, because nobody can see chromosome by delivering a baby, but it's merely organs. And I apologize for being very crude here. It just happens that for me, it's a very normal word. I happen to be a physician, but sex assigned at birth could also encounter errors because, there are misalignments between visible genitals at birth that may not develop in the future, that may reveal chromosome differences from what was visible. So it's all, it's a stepwise approach, let's say. At birth, you say, this is maybe a girl, maybe, and then later some other things happen. And then there's a totally different topic, which is who we are sentimentally and physically and or both, or just one of the two, attracted to. Some people say who you would go to bed with. I think it's a little bit crude. It doesn't have to go to bed with. It can be hold their hand on the sofa or feel very comfortable with. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with your gender. As we know, this is about something that has commonly been called sexuality, although it's not covering just sex. It's and that's covered in emotionally attracted to. So I'm not an expert for the last two parts, and sometimes they are divided, sometimes they're not. What I want to come back on this graph, there are variations of it. Something called the genderbread, which genderbread, which is a homonymy to gingerbread, where the little cartoon of the gingerbread is used instead of the unicorn. I think this one is more loyal to the original creator and maybe more accurate, but there's nothing totally accurate, and I'm also only representing what I learned. Okay. About other genders in the top panel, there are multiple populations around the world where another gender than female or male has existed in a minority of people. And in this continent, a number of native people have used the term two spirits, which tells you something. They don't say they have no gender, they don't reject the word gender, but they kind of englobe the two by saying two spirits. There are examples in other continents as well. So at this point, I think if you have learned something or heard something that feels weird or that I didn't display well, and again, I cannot talk by direct experience of this because I I'm merely a mother and a reader. However, I did ask permission for my kid to disclose today that I'm a mother of a transgender person, because ultimately it's always the person's choice whether to be out or not. And from what I understand, whether it's for gender or for who your preferred partners could be or partner, it's a never-ending story to out yourself until one day we won't care. And we won't be surprised. I read a European survey that's happening every 5 years, very detailed about a perception of LGBTQI things among the population in 27 countries, if I'm correct. And while still last year, even the country the most advanced for multiple indicators in perception of LGBTQ, at least of gay and lesbian and bisexual, was still 80% were still not sure they would vote for a gay president. And I'm not talking about Bulgaria. This is at the far opposite end, so it's probably close to 100% would not. With that, I'm sure I have convinced you. I'm trying to advocate. I didn't want to make this a rally, but I cannot help advocating. So I would like to maybe go back more to concepts if you have any questions or situations. And to relax you, I will show this slide. This is, I think you call this a graphics or comics, which I just bought on the recommendation of another parent of a transgender non-binary kid in my company, and who is actually in Europe. And I took some citations either from this book or from something that we have elaborated between parents of transgender kids recently, which is a summary of stories about our transgender kids or gender non-binary. So maybe one thing that strikes when you talk to people who are trans, actually didn't have so many occasions to have one-to-one conversation with transgender people or people of transgender experience, but I did, and I did in a group setting. The ones who knew they were trans young, they say it's painful. Certainly my kid had growing pains and it had to do with that. And education by the trans person to the others about what it is to be trans can be exhausting. And this is why advocates are welcome, and people who get to understand a little bit more, even if they might not have immediately a transgender acquaintance or friend, make you more susceptible to help in need. The adult trans person I last talked to told me if there is one recommendation you can make to people you will talk to today, is when you meet a transgender person that you notice could be transgender, probably because their physical transition or the way they present happened late, maybe in adulthood after hormonal induced body changes and voice changes had already happened and were settled in. So if you suppose that somebody could be trans, the best thing you can do is to not raise any eyebrow, not mention anything. If you would be in a situation of direct interaction and you feel that you want to have a longer conversation with this person, my recommendation would be introduce yourself with your pronouns, because this signals it's safe to talk to you. If you're not very confident, you're not sure that you would be able to say anything sensible to that person, just skip it. Just be natural and nothing particular. So maybe if you don't have question, I might learn from you. So have you been perplexed or exposed or uncertain?
Well, Priscille, I've got a question, which is right there on the page. How do you define queer? And queer seems to be an accepted word today. I remember, a few years ago, it was an insult. So it looks like the LGBTQ community is now re-owning that word.
Yes.
Can you tell us
Yes.
more about what it
Yes.
encompasses?
I think you almost know it all. So you're right. Queer, if I'm correct, and not being a native English speaker, I had to look it up myself. So queer, if I'm correct, somebody correct me, please, means strange and or awkward. And years ago, it was used almost as an insult to people whose look didn't fit their assigned gender or whose behavior or manners. A little bit as if maybe transgender people or drag queens or were stigmatized by using the word queer. In today's culture, and this is debated in the community, and my understanding, there's back and forth, but it did make it to the acronym LGBTQAI+, which you can extend more. So queer can be used for sexuality, it can be used for gender. So somehow, my understanding is that somehow the people who use queer about themselves, they don't necessarily tell you what gender they are. It can be about sexuality, it can be about gender. I know some people who use queer for both, for themselves. So they say here on the gender identity, they would be on the third arrow, other gender. And on the physical or emotional attraction, they would be attracted to other gender as well as women and men.
Ooh, hold on. So that's a bit complex. So you are attracted toward trans people,
or men,
or men or women.
I mean, trans people can be men.
Yeah, you're right. So
or they can be non-binary. So in other words, for somebody who feels queer in sexuality, if you use queer in the sense of other than straight,
mm-hmm.
it could mean, doesn't have to mean, but it could mean I can be attracted to anyone, doesn't have to be man, doesn't have to be female, doesn't have to be non-binary. This is not the point.
Okay.
Of course, it needs a little bit more knowledge.
And earlier you said introduce yourself with your pronoun. So if I were talking to you without a name tag, how would I do that?
Hello, my name is Stanislas Bourquelot, and my pronouns are he, his.
Okay.
I'm assuming these are your pronouns.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else has a question for Priscille? Elizabeth, you're muted. Oh. So muted. Go to the bottom screen and click on the...
Okay, hi. When you use... Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, just... I'm learning here. So when you use they, you use in a sentence, you would use they as a neutral pronoun, more or less, or just...
Yes.
And so you would say they is...
No, they are.
They are. You still use the plural always. Okay.
Yes. And it's actually the same as you are. Mm-hmm. Remember? Yes. We don't say you is. At some point, I think English language was using you is, but or thou is. Mm-hmm. Somebody correct me here. But you are is used for singular. So they are you can say similarly. Now there is debate, and I think we don't have to know this perfectly. For example, if you say they did it them, so I did it myself, you did it yourself, they did it. So here is the question: do you say themselves, which would match are? But no, some people say you did it, they did it themselves, just like you did it yourself. But you did it yourself, singular. That's a kind of little memory trick.
Ah, okay.
I think.
Yeah, I wanted just to, because when you explain first what the he, she, you just said, yeah, they are.
Yes.
And you said that the person you talk to can have their eyebrow rising because they would be surprised. And I was just thinking the same thing, that it might have been useful or helpful to have they is, that would suppress any, that would be clearer, for everybody.
Yeah. I think these debates about semantics are happening for every group that claims to be recognized and respected. My grandmother, who was Jewish, has experienced that. I think we can't decide for people what would be good, but they debate, So I'm not a member of the transgender community. I cannot start a debate. And by the way, as I just mentioned, you are.
Yeah. No, I.
Single and plural. It's the same. So they are.
You is used for singular and plural.
Now, I will tell you, at the beginning, when I was talking to people who don't know me personally, and the topic came on my kid, which whom I call a kid, or I use their first name sometimes directly. But if I say my kid, and then I use they, okay, and people don't catch it because they're not yet familiar. Sometimes they get confused and say, "Do you have several kids?" If they do, then I may answer. If they don't notice, I don't make a class about that. It's a little bit the problem of gender non-binary people, that basically you would have to educate people every time you open your mouth, right? You say, my pronouns are they. It's exhausting. So recently my kid told me that in general life, when it doesn't really matter and I don't feel like, they authorize me to use either they, them, or he, his, which feels strange for me, but it might be easier. So when some anonymous people call me and they misunderstand it, they said, "Did you say girl or boy?" I'll sometimes deflect to boy.
Okay.
I want to share a statistics with you, a piece of statistics that I heard of both in US last year already and in Europe this year. Some big surveys were run across major cities, so it has the bias of cities. It's not been necessarily done in rural areas, but that's where you collect the most respondents to a survey. And I'm talking about school surveys in middle school and high schools. And I think, if I remember well, in middle school today, in 20 big cities of US, half of the kids believe they are somewhere on the LGBTQI rainbow. That gives you a sense of something is evolving in the society.
And it's not definite, I believe that you can feel.
So if your question is, do people know their gender when they're 14? Well, some do since they are 3. Not all. Some people are thrown into this perplexity and difficulty of recognizing their gender as the one assigned at birth during teenage, after puberty, probably as a result of some hormonal changes that kick in and make them wonder why do I look like this? I don't recognize myself. But some kids know at 3. Some adults discover at 45. All scenarios exist, but there is a common moment in puberty where this is a search period. If you wonder how can people know that it's really happening and it's beyond simple exploration, there are criteria elaborated by international organizations, including international World Association for Transgender Health, where a certain time, a certain insistence, a certain persistence is required to consider some medical aspects if people are willing to have some medical or some surgical affirmative procedures. Generally, what's called a transition has 3 different levels that don't need to all be walked by people of transgender experience. The first one is called social transition. So pronouns could be one. So somebody you knew as a woman yesterday can tell you, from now on, I use he, his pronouns, and I would like you to use them. So that's a social transition. It can be also with a change of name. And change of name in daily life, but change of name in official documentation is quite a maze. Yeah. Starts with birth certificate, goes on with driver's license, etc., etc. That's level 1. Level 2 is medical. Medical could mean, in social, there is this obvious part, pronouns and name, but they can be other things, the way you dress, some gender expression that people feel very seriously. They don't want to be identified whatsoever with the gender assigned at birth, and they will try physically to present to you in a way that you consider them from another gender. For example, somebody dressing with skirts and high heels would rarely be understood by the majority of us as a man, and that may be what the person desires. That's part of social transition. And then there are other steps that can or cannot be or don't have to be taken. Medical. So by medical, I mean medicinal, using medical intervention, but not necessarily surgical intervention. And then possibly some surgical interventions. One thing that should never be asked outside of a very intimate relationship with someone is, did you go through surgery? Because it's really, why are we going to ask what's below your clothes, right? Yeah. That's very intrusive. That's really intrusive. And in today's world, because this field is evolving so quickly, everybody makes mistakes, including physicians including those that are sometimes supposed to be trained specifically, and I'm saying physicians, I mean healthcare providers in the large sense. So nobody is guilty. It's just a learning curve that is very steep. What matters is to not repeat errors, because I don't know. I mean, I have a very low voice in general, and I've been mistaken for a man numerous times on the phone. And when it happened to me to be mistaken for a man, which in glossary is called misgendered, as a man in person. So, for example, sitting at a restaurant and the waiter comes and the room is dark and they tell me, "Sir, what will you take?" Well, with all the years I have behind me, I still didn't feel happy. So imagine a person of transgender experience who realized that there are different gender, and in spite of their effort, sometimes having a pronoun pins, having a label, wearing makeup to signal that they are more feminine than you might have guessed from their size or their voice, and you keep using the wrong pronouns, this is really, really painful for them. So we have to try. We can't succeed every time, but we have to try to do our best and take habits. Any other questions from those participants still on board? Maybe I'm gonna raise a question so to make sure everybody's here. Did you ever consciously meet a transgender person?
Yes, because we have one of our recipients is a transgender. So yes, without any doubt.
Okay. Has everybody on this call ever met this person?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I ask at the address of Paul Kelly as well? I see two people, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Paul is muted. Yeah, they are muted. Oh, they said no? Yeah, I think they said no.
Okay.
I did, actually. Yes.
Yes, we have.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you. So, did you feel awkward?
Actually, a little bit. The first time I met her, when she told us that we were supposed to call her, let's say, because I was always calling him, let's say, calling this person by him, he, his. And around 2 or 3 months ago, she told us that she wanted to be called she, her. So the first time I was like, I don't want to make a mistake. Pay attention, don't make the mistake.
Yes.
So the first time was a little bit weird, but after that, I met her, I don't know how many times, 10 times, around 10 times after this first experience, and it was good. She realized that she was really happy, actually, because she realized that I was calling her she, her.
And how, and I'm curious, Macarena, in English, when you're talking to a person, you don't really have to use her because you're talking to the person, right?
Yeah.
So, but maybe you were talking in Spanish, and as a Roman language, just like my native language, French, we use gender for everything. We say happy with a gender, right?
Yes.
So was it the case that you were in conversation with her? It was the choice of, for example, adjectives?
Yes, it was adjectives. Most of the time it was adjectives, yeah.
So let's imagine, so I think that's very interesting because it means that for people of certain native language, including French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, probably Greek, there will be much more occasions to be misgendered in your face. And did this woman mention a change of name?
Mention what?
Did they mention a change of name as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
So they gave you the full picture. I'm a woman. Please refer to me with feminine terms and my new name, right? In other words.
Yeah, actually now she's using makeup, for example.
I'm sorry?
She's using makeup.
Which could be something different, yeah. But
at the beginning she was doing, but very, very pale colors, let's say, and now it's more colorful and you realize, let's say, that she is using some makeup.
So I've heard personally of colleagues who came out at work after years and years and years of being in the closet as transgender. Sorry, I shouldn't. I think I'm confusing two aspects. After some time of being in the closet, they couldn't live a double life anymore. At home, being their true self, and at work, being not fully themselves. And there is more and more in companies, at least in the US, where sometimes companies may be sanctuaries compared to the external world. There is, I mean, companies or organization, there is a tendency to emphasize the safe environment for people to feel able to be themselves. And it's not a propaganda word when I say to be themselves. It's really understood that if you have to hide so important things from your co-workers all day long, if you can't say that your partner is of that gender, or if you can't say that you're a woman when everybody thinks you're a man, chances are you cannot perform at the full speed of your energy because you're permanently protecting yourself by hiding something. So I'm actually very happy for you, Macarena, that this person was so overt and stood for their gender. It's a mark of trust and great.
No, I'm very happy for her. I know that it took some time to do this kind of change for her and to realize that she wanted to do it. But I mean, good for her, without any doubt. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any other? Oh yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah. So when we use Mr., we use Mrs., Miss for transgender. Correct.
So some people use the most common way of addressing formally is mix, like
pronounce it MX. Okay.
It's MX, and you pronounce it mix, or some people want to pronounce it more mux, as if it was a U in between, so to not have confusion with miss, or which I think is an obsolete term, but happens all the time. So mix MX. Thank you. But some other people, they don't want any title. They just want their name to be used. They also don't want pronouns. They want to just refer to them by their name. So in English, you can do that. In Spanish, to only refer to somebody with their name and not have adjectives, that's a little bit more complicated. But I've not experienced that yet. Or at least I know that my kid, even though our native culture is French and my kid was living in France for the whole last year, they're not really trying to use and develop a French special language for non-binary people. They don't care. They don't want to spend their energy there. They just want to go through life as peacefully as possible.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any more questions for Priscille? Will you be sharing the slides?
A call. I'll ask you if you feel so inclined in future meetings, you might want to ask people before the call to place a tag with their pronouns, whether they have their name on it, depending on the size as they want. That would be useful, but you may consider that. I don't know if it's applicable, but that's a proposal. And the other is, if you hear of somebody who wants to, or who is in a very early stage of wondering and having a headache and difficulty about this topic, I'm talking especially parents or grandparents, aunts, uncle, feel free to send them my way.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you. How will you be sharing the slides on the volunteer? Yeah, you could put a link. If they are Google slides, you could share them on the volunteer chat.
Okay, I'll if I'm in pain, I will ask you for a slight little guidance, but I'll try to do that. Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, don't hesitate. Thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you, Priscille, for leading this call.
Thank you, Stanislas and Macarena, for the invite and all for your interest. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye, Priscille.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.